Everyone, welcome back to the Emotional Man podcast. Today, we have the treat of having Daniel Korolev with us. He is the founder and owner of We Are Royals. He's also happily married with two children. He has Logan, who's 2 years old, and Madison, who is 11. And also, not to be left out, his Jack Russell, who is his fur baby. So, Daniel, welcome to the show. If you wouldn't mind, why don't we go ahead and start off just talking about We Are Royals and just what the company is and what your mission is and the kind of genesis behind why you started this company in the first place.
Yeah, thanks. First and foremost, thanks for having me. So, We Are Royals was really born out of my commercial banking experience. I was a commercial banker for a majority of my career. I worked with thousands of clients. I worked for various banks, small, large. My last employer was a private bank. And I always wanted to be on my own simply because I have always advised clients to build their own equity. And having working for somebody, you're just not going to do that. And so I think that was really the core why. And I thought to myself, what problems am I going to solve by going on my own? I have wealth of knowledge working with businesses, extending credit. I've extended probably over $200 million of credit to businesses over the course of my career. And risk management is something that was near and dear to my heart because we had to underwrite loans. We had to present the client, understand their business culture, and have a favorable relationship with the bank and for us to extend credit. So I've really been used to preparing credit memos, do full risk management for the client, do analysis. And that's how the insurance portion of Where Royals was born, because I would put together a risk management profile, send it to the agency, and they would say, "Hey, thanks. This is fantastic. We're going to write a policy for the client." I would review it to make sure it's on par with the bank requirements. And then I had an aha moment saying, why am I not monetizing at this relationship? I'm doing the work, and this is something that is useful to me. And this is a perpetual model because a client needs insurance. We all need insurance, whether it's personal or business, and you have to have it every year. So that's the idea that I had for the business. That's one vertical of We Are Royals and how it was born. Second part is I thought, what other services that I can provide that I'm really good at? So cash flow management and specifically payment processing or credit card processing, as it's known, is something that I've done throughout my career. So I extracted that from my banking experience and I inserted into the Royals offering. And then the third vertical of our business is loan brokerage or loan advisory, if you will. So now if the clients do need a loan, they can come to us. We represent them from start to finish. We charge a fee. We find them a bank and really take them from the entire process. And the reason it's good to work with us because I sat down on both sides of a table. I was a banker. Now I represent a client. And also I'm not limited to my bank. I can find any bank that is really suitable for the specific client. So that's where we are. And I think the last piece that I forgot to mention is we also do personal lines, which was a derivative of our commercial insurance because our business owners come to us and say, "Hey, Dan, we love working with you. Can you insure my home? Can you insure my house?" Absolutely. So we do that. So that's in a nutshell what we are and why we do it.
Now, you had a pretty cush job with your previous bank. So why take the leap? You wanted to build equity, but there's always like this conversation, this leap across the chasm where you leave stability in search for adventure, but you weren't taking that leap alone. You had a wife, you have kids. So where was your family? What was your family situation when you made this initial decision?
So it was really during COVID. I think a lot of people would relate. So I was very happy with my last employer, very happy with the bank, the work that we did. Just can't say enough of it. And I think it was just a combination of factors. One is we were giving out a lot of loans for PPP loans to businesses. I mean, I really worked hours. We worked probably 6, 7 months straight up. over the weekends. Didn't really see my family. We were passionate about doing that, extended a lot of credit. But at the end of it all, I realized I haven't even seen my family. I was leaving home at 6, 7 in the morning, come back late. I haven't even seen my son. My daughter wasn't born at the time. So I thought to myself, this is one thing. Unfortunately, too, my wife had a miscarriage during that time as well. So we had an additional burden, psychological burden that has happened. So that was rough. So we sat down, we thought, we're young, we can change. We need to change. It's important. It just didn't feel right. So we're a family that embraces the desire, because a lot of us really think of, oh, I should, I could. My biggest regret would have been, if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So that's what led us to Utah, and just a combination of factors just said, like, I want to be with my family. I'm young enough to go and build my own equity. I want to build my own future. And this was just, I saw it as a leap of faith, but I also saw it as a necessity into the future, because I needed to challenge myself. And I don't regret anything of my past. This was just an evolution of me and my family. And luckily, I have an amazing partner who supported me during that transition, and we really dove into unknown. And to your point, it is absolutely terrifying going from a cushy job, being an SVP, but going out there and saying, you know what, let me challenge the world. Let me offer something. Let me solve some problems on a bigger scale. And that's what I ended up doing.
No, it's funny because it seems like a lot of business owners have this kind of story where they go through this really just difficult time period where they're working a lot of hours and they hit like this breaking point where, hey, this is too much. Now, what's interesting is that sometimes the working spouse realizes it, but it's the spouse that's not working or the spouse that's really affecting that brings up the issue. So in your situation, were you the one that realized like, hey, I'm working too much and I'm gonna go talk to my spouse about changing it? Or did she bring it to you, or was it mutual? Talk to me about what brought about that conversation that I'm working too much, and how did that evolve to I should start my own company?
So I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always had side businesses. I always done something different aside from my day job. So that's something but I never cultivated it into something that was full time. So my wife was aware of it. And I think it was a really joint conversation. One of the things that we always talk about in the family is, I like to over communicate. And I think I'm the over communicator in our relationship. And I think it was important for us to realize that you need to take risks. So it wasn't something that was spontaneous. I would say it's something that evolved over time. And I think we did not ignore certain things that bothered us. We said, I feel like if I change the course of my career, I may be able to establish a better balance. I wanted to see my son more. So that was me personally, because I lost my mom to cancer when she was 48. I was in my early 20s. I lost my best friend. And to me, I've always lived in the now. That was the moment in my life where I realized that we may not have tomorrow, so you need to change accordingly. So that's something that really fueled the change, really. So I'd say it's a combination of that, but also other things that have already been in motion.
So it seems like you already had the habit of kind of communicating with your wife where you're at. You already had this kind of desire from your past, losing your mother, this desire to have this relationship with your son. And you saw that your current path wasn't leading where you wanted to be, either professionally or personally or with your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what advice would you give potential business owners or business owners? Because a lot of times what's happened is that we get really focused on our professional life. Our business becomes our baby. We have this relationship with it. And we can get so sucked into this relationship with our business that we start struggling with our relationship with our kids, with our relationship with our spouse, or even our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
So what has helped you keep tabs on those relationships? Because it seems like you're pretty good at communicating where you're at. So what have you learned about communicating and keeping tabs on those relationships and balancing them?
I think the important question to ask your spouse and vice versa is what is truly important? Because I firmly, and I've listened to a lot of, I'm a sucker for motivational speeches and coaches, and I listen and read. I probably read most books that there are out there. So I believe that the best success you'll have is when you balance things out. And that's the challenge for all of us. So I think that's where that's the advice, is that you need to have a balance. You need to figure out what your priorities are, because your priorities could be, today I want to do that, but is that going to lead me to be more, to achieve my goals in 10 years from now? So you got to do the micro and you got to do the macro. So that's what my wife and I did, because look, I'm 40 years old. I'm a workhorse right now. I don't want to be working the same way. I want to work smarter, but I also don't want to be working the same way when I'm 50 years old or 60 years old. I want to do different things. But in order for me to achieve that, I needed to switch things up. And that's the challenge. It's a leap of faith. But I think that's the communication you really need to figure out. And the same thing was for my wife. Yeah, I asked her, like, what is important? She needed change. She went through a very difficult time. Both of us did. But I felt like she was my priority at that point in time. And entrepreneurship, like, I think, like, the two pieces really fit. So that's how we end up doing what we did. So I think it's, again, coming back, it's like, what's the important thing? And it's sometimes very difficult to see the broader spectrum, like you said, because you get sucked in and you need to zoom out. And I think, and you'll achieve clarity, and then making decisions will be easier.
You really touch on something really quite, I think, pivotal, or which can be pivotal for relationships. Most conflict in a relationship comes from a divergence of values. So, for example, and this is what we see a lot in entrepreneurs and business owners, is you start really valuing the potential financial possibilities that you can create for your family. And you get so honed in on that because you want to be able to provide generational wealth for your family. You want to provide these amazing opportunities after you go through this work period, and then you can be able to enjoy your life together. But at the same time, your spouse may just really value having a good relationship now. And so we see this. One of the previous people I spoke with on the show, they call them walls of indifference start to grow. You value something over here, she values something over here, and you're indifferent to each other's values. And so you start this divergence, and you get these walls of indifference. And you said you talked to your spouse about what is important to her. Now, at any time, did you ever find that what was important to her didn't align with what was important to you at the time?
Certainly. Absolutely. So, absolutely. But that's why we respect each other. So I know what's important to her. So that becomes my priority, and vice versa. Absolutely.
So
Because,
what did the conversation look like when you bridge the gap? Because you have the value gap, you become aware of the value gap,
yeah,
but then you said she is your priority. So
yes.
how do you navigate that switch? Because you can get so focused in on on the company, but then you say, oh no, my wife's the priority. How do you navigate that switch? How do you have the self-awareness to make that flip, or to recognize, stop yourself before you go over the edge?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we did is really reassess on a daily basis. I think that so when you're going through that transition, because it's very important, is I was like, how do you feel? What's going on with you today? This is how I felt. What do we do? What do we want to do tomorrow? And that, so it becomes more of a daily rather than a weekly or a monthly situation. And I think that's how we're able to navigate it, because we both knew clarity, because we knew that entrepreneurship requires tremendous amount of time. Now, I didn't have to commute anymore. Let's talk practicality here. So I decided to work from home. At that point, we were going through COVID, so no one knew we still didn't know what was going to happen. But so you realize, let's practically, I get more time. I'm at home, so we can balance things out. Yet I will have tremendous amount of work to be done. But then let's focus on what's important to you, and we can achieve that on a daily basis. Do we get it wrong? Absolutely. So is every day perfect? Absolutely not. Far from it. But I think when you're communicating together, that's what allowed us to go through that transition.
That's amazing. Developing those micro visions for each day, touching or what's important to you today. How did last day go? A lot of times as husbands, as fathers, just in families have like these daily rhythms where there's certain like points of high, I call them high friction, or there's certain periods of the day that are just tougher than the other parts of the day. Have you experienced that? What are the toughest parts of the day for you and your family?
When the baby doesn't sleep and you're sleep deprived, right? So then I know that first year, my kids were, it's all about mom. So I understand that if mom's frustrated, it has nothing to do with me. Something to do with her not getting enough sleep. And it's a challenge. So you have to, and I know that she could be frustrated, and I know it's nothing to do with me. So that's important because it's very easy. That could be an easy flip. And I could sense that. I would navigate through that and try to provide as much support as I possibly can. But a lot of times, unfortunately, you can't. And that's as a husband, as a dad, you want to try. And I'm sure a lot of parents can relate, to me. And that was the same thing with my son. But then, year two, when he was 2 years old, 3 years old, was a little bit different. So that was the high point. You're stressed out. The house isn't clean. So those are the points that you got to be very aware of.
What helps you? So another thing that we deal with as business owners and as parents and being in relationships, we experience a lot of emotional taxing. As a owner, you're experiencing stress, just trying to keep the company going and growing. And then you're experiencing stress as a spouse, especially when you have an 11th month old.
Yeah.
And then you just have the interrelationship friction that can come about. So how do you manage your emotional load as a business owner, husband, and parent?
So I've been an athlete, so exercise is probably on the top of the list. My wife doesn't lift weights like I do, for example. That's my outlet. But I got her into running, Peloton, kickboxing, non-weight training activities. So I wouldn't say force her, but I would try to create times where she could do that. And same for myself. My routine always been to wake up early before anybody wakes up and get that out of the way, because then when you feel physically strong, or you could be emotionally defeated, but then you spend 10 minutes on the bag or lifting weights, whatever your physical outlet is, that really helps because it's not going away. It's not going to go away. And when you dive into entrepreneurship, I've worked with gazillion of business clients. It's not, if you committed, this is not something that you can fix overnight. You just have to realize this is part of life now. It's a lifestyle. So how to manage that. So that I think I'd say sports is something very important, like physical fitness. And then I try to eat healthy because we can deal with stress and emotional burdens a lot better when we're physically strong. And that goes for both for the, husband and wife. So we always try to do that. So I think that's really how we able to do that. And again, coming back to communication, if I'm stressed out, I'm not going to hold it back from my wife. I'm not going to say, oh, we're going to get it. Of course, we're going to get it done. But today was a hard day. It is what it is. And that's how we communicate.
Well, we're going to kind of transition to the very last question. I love what you shared here, just having healthy habits. I also think behind all of that is the way that you view those items. I have to exercise and eat healthy so that my body can help support all of this. Just incredible advice here. As business owners, it's really easy to gauge success in our businesses. We can look at money in, money out, we can look at cash flow, capital, growth, the number of clients we have. How would you go about measuring success in your family or measuring the health of your family? How
Well,
would you respond to that question?
I actually think it goes both ways. And this is something that I've realized over the course of the years is that it's not separate anymore. When you start making business and personal separate, and that's the biggest challenge, I think, for all of us, is that you're going to have that separation that you talked about earlier. So to me, I decided to have one lifestyle. That's it. This is my lifestyle. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm part of the community. I'm a client to some. I have clients. So that is just all encompassing. So to me, success is really not, yeah, there are milestones like talking about cash flow. Oh, I want to hit this number or I want to get this, whatever it is. I think those are great milestones. But to me, success is more of a state of mind all the time. And I think that's what allows us to be where we are. Because again, nothing is guaranteed. So a lot of times I notice personally that a lot of times we say, oh, what if I just get that? Or I get to that little thing, both in a relationship. Oh, what if my wife and I go on a date twice a week, which doesn't happen for us. We've been living in Utah for 2 years and it's just us. We don't have relatives around to take care of us. So it's just us. So I'm not going to think that, oh, I need to wait until kids grow up, right? Oh, if they're like 8 years old, we're going to be more independent. Yes, that time will come at some point, but today it's not. So for us, it's more of a state of mind. And I think that's really the success of the family is a state of mind. Because when you have a state of mind, you start making daily habits or daily decisions, which are very difficult to do a lot of times. It just takes a lot of discipline.
So expound on the state of mind. What would you consider is, and I hesitate to use the words a successful state of mind, a healthy state of mind, a state of mind that aligns with what you believe. So how do you know when you're in that state of mind and when you're out?
It's I think it's here, right? So you can be emotionally defeated, right? So that's not the state of mind that I want to be in. So when I'm that, I try to get back into, let's say, a positive state of mind or calm state of mind, as an example, where I'm making rational decisions, where I'm aware of things. I think one of the things I noticed that, especially as business owners, we start being aware of your spouse's, let's say, conversations. You're on the phone and she says, do this. And you're like, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I didn't pay attention to her. That was nice. You need to go back to that. I catch myself all the time. And so I think that's my gaugement where I know I'm out of my state of mind. And I think that's important to be cognizant of that. And I would say another thing that we actually talked about it, we just talked about it last week. There's a lot of different emotions. And one of the emotions that for me, that is, I would say the pillar of our family and our vision, what we stand for is to be proud. So I would ask my son, did you feel proud today? You may lost a soccer match. I may not won a client. I may not have done this. I gave it 200%. I feel proud. Did you feel proud that you felt a certain way, you confronted your emotions? So that's been lately, that for the last 2-3 weeks, the word proud has been really on our minds, both for my wife and I. So we've really been focusing on that because economy is challenging. You got to grow the business. You got to do all these things. So feeling proud is something that we like to zone in and focus on.
I love that. I love that. And I think this is probably one of the cornerstones of why your family, I'm going to use the word successful, meaning that you
Yeah.
have a meaningful, rich relationship with each other and with yourself. And this holistic health is you're anchoring to values and you understand what your spouse values. You're communicating what you value, what she values. You're bridging the value gap. You're communicating this vision, your plans together. I really think you're doing some amazing things to not only build a rich life a rich whole life that encompasses, like you said, it's not these separate pieces of yourself. It's this whole self that's your company, your family, your children. Really quite incredible.
Yes, thank you. And I also think that success, how you define it, is very individual. And I think we need to focus on that because what consider successful could be very different from what you consider successful. Like when you and I met initially before at a networking event, right? Our definition is so different, but I think the principles behind it is what makes it valuable to have a conversation to understand what you, for example, consider that. Like, all right, cool. You're doing this. Let me try to adopt that into my relationship. And I think that's what people need to realize. And because success looks in different ways. And as I grow, and that goes both in business and personal, because, for example, I don't have a vision of my company. Like I'm not going to become a Geico or a State Farm of insurance, as an example. That's not what I consider a success. I have my own boutique vision of my company, which is completely different. And on a personal level, the same thing. My wife and I have certain things that we like to have on a daily basis and share a goal to work together. And that's what we consider a success. And that could be probably totally different than yours, right?
But the important thing is to have the conversation to define what success looks based on your values, just your vision, and then developing a plan to achieve it.
And I also think that, so I've been married now for, I'd probably say like 10 years, 9 years. The definition of success and where we are also changes. And that's something that we needed to realize. I hope I'm a different person than I was a year ago. And I really hope my wife is too. But we want to make sure that we're going together. We're dancing partners. And I think that's important too. And that's one of our priorities to make sure that we know how we change and how we I think, what is it? Oprah, I think once said, be your biggest fan and your biggest critic and do the same thing for your spouse. Right. And then critic, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in a positive, constructive way. And I think that's very important because if something's that important to my wife, like we're talking about, she loves garden. So every week I set time to work on our garden to make sure our landscaping is done well, things like that, because it's important to her. And that's the time that we bond. So there's an example.
Daniel, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing these words of wisdom, the kind of your experience, what you've learned. I've definitely taken away a lot of things that I can apply in my own life. If people want to come learn more about you, whether it's about your company or just your life experiences, where's the best place for them to find you?
They can go on our website, weareroyals.com, with a hyphen in between, we-r-royals.com. Put a form in and we'll reach out to you. You actually started this because this is my first podcast that I've ever done in my entire life. So that's exciting. There's a big milestone. We're talking about milestones. I want to make sure that we also have, I'm late to the game, but we're doing it. YouTube channel is going to grow for us. So we're going to put a lot more content, not just to business, but personal, because again, it's all together on there. But again, our website is probably the best way to reach us.
Fantastic.
So, yep.
People should want to reach out to you. I hope people do reach out to you if you need insurance or there's help with your banking relationships. Daniel is the man. So thank you for coming on the show, Daniel. It's been a treat.
Thank you, sir. And you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.